David here with Figboot on Pens. Today I have for you another top 10 list. And the topic of today's list is Grail pens. Now, the subject of Grail pens is extremely subjective. It's a very personal decision. What I feel is an appropriate end-all be-all fountain pen for your collection might not even come close to making your personal list. But this will be my list, and maybe it will give you some food for thought. Now, what type of pen do I categorize as a Grail pen? My main criteria is that it is difficult to obtain. Now, that can mean a number of different things. It could mean it's difficult to obtain because the pen is a limited edition or something that's no longer in production. It can also be difficult to obtain if only a small number of those pens are being produced. Those criteria are pretty commonly accepted in the community as the definition of a Grail pen. But I'm going to add one more that some folks don't necessarily agree with, and that's solely to do with price. I feel that a pen can be readily available in the market, and it can be a Grail pen for you because of the price tag. In that circumstance, I feel that the pen can indeed be difficult to obtain. You might need to budget for a while and save for a while in order to be able to make that purchase. And in that case, you most definitely had to go on a journey to acquire that pen. So I feel that price can also be a determining factor in whether or not a pen can be considered a Grail pen. For example, I have always wanted a Mont Blanc Hitchcock. I'm a big film buff, and Hitchcock is one of my favorite directors. It is a cool looking pen and just hits all the right buttons for me. But I feel that it is just too expensive. Well, not that it's too expensive, but the price that they are asking is not one that I am willing to pay. In regard to this list, I haven't put it in any particular order, but the slots are filled with pens that I feel are worthy of being labeled a Grail pen. It's not necessarily a list of my top or favorite pens, but ones that I feel are worthy of the Grail label. And I'm not going to be discussing price for each of these pens, mainly because there can be a wide variance in price depending on how and where you acquire the pen. And since some of these pens are out of production, then there is no current retail price, and so the valuation would be rather subjective. Okay, let's get to the list. For this list, I did have a couple of runners-up. These were pens that at some point in the creation of this list were included, but I had to make some tough decisions. These are all pens that I don't feel would disappoint you if you picked any of them up. First up is any pen from the Alea Pen Company. Now, I have two of their pens. This is the Nui Nalu, and then this one is the Kilauea. But any of their pens are worthy to be included here. Each of these designs are inspired by a natural element from the Hawaiian Islands. This Nui Nalu is inspired by a crashing wave on the north shore of Oahu. And this Kilauea is inspired by the lava flowing from its namesake, the Kilauea volcano, located on the Big Island of Hawaii. The Jonathan Brooks acrylics he creates for Alea are, in my opinion, some of those beautiful acrylics you can get your hands on. Unique, vibrant patterns and colors that significantly represent the inspiration pictures for the design of each pen. They are just stunning. Okay, next up is a pen which at times has been in my overall top 10 favorite pen list, and that is the Trejo Genkai. Now, the full name of this pen is the Trejo Tamanuri Onshu on Genkai, with the Tamanuri Onshu describing the Arushi lacquer colors and technique used on this pen. It is a very large pen. In fact, it's the largest pen in my collection. It is a Japanese eyedropper with an enormous ink capacity. In addition, the nib on the Trejo Genkai is one of the coolest looking nibs in my collection, in my opinion. Trejo has another nib design that is referred to as the Fireball. If I should ever pick up one of those Trejos, or the next Trejo I pick up, I'd like it to be with that nib stamping. That design looks pretty cool as well. For being so large, this pen is still very usable. It's not overly weighty, and I just really love the Arushi treatment on this pen. Okay, Last honorable mention, and it's a pen that was painful to leave off this top 10 list. Up until the last minute, it was on this list, but there was a pen that I just couldn't leave out. So this one received the unfortunate demotion. And that unlucky pen is the Sailor King of Pen Ebonite. I really love the slick, classic looks of the King of Pen, and this size really works well for me as well. I have a King of Pen nib on 5 different pens in my collection, and while they're all mediums, each have their own personalities. And of those nibs, the one on this King of Pen Ebonite is my favorite. It's really difficult to come up with any negatives in regard to this pen. It is definitely worthy to be considered as a Grail pen. And yeah, it hurts a little to leave this one off. So, okay. Enough about the honorable mentions. Let's take a look at the pens which did make this list. First up is the pen that knocked the King of Pen Ebonite off this list, and that is the Pen 18111 Night Sky Sakura, or basically any pen by Pen 18111. It's made by a gentleman by the name of Yoshi Nakamura, who is based out of Brooklyn, New York. Now, we all use pens because they give us a sense of joy and satisfaction. I picked this pen up in August at the DC Pen Show, and since that time, no other pen in my collection has given me the level of joy that this pen has. I just look at this pen and smile. It is just so beautiful. Typically, I have kind of more permanent homes for my pen, and then they come in and out of the storage when I use them. But this Pen 18111 has not found a permanent home because it hasn't left one of my dudek cubes that I keep on my desk. I'm using it all the time. In my mind, what makes this pen special is a combination of a couple of things. First of all, the base deep blue acrylic on this model is beautiful. Then each of these individual flowers, as well as the golden moon, are laser etched into the pen, then filled with a pearlescent powder and resin mixture. This way, the flowers and moon are made of a material just as strong and durable as the rest of the pen. They aren't going to wear or chip off, which could potentially happen if they were simply painted onto the barrel. Then we have this unbelievable cast bronze roll stop. The branch is of a cherry blossom tree that wraps its way around the cap. The cap doesn't post, which is fine, because the feeling of this branch in my offhand while I'm writing is something I really enjoy. At the next show I attend, where Yoshi also attends, it will be very difficult for me to not pick up another one of these pens. It's just amazingly beautiful, and I had to include it in this list because I feel it's just that special. Okay, next up is a pen that has obtained legendary status in the pen world, and that is the classic Pens LB5. I have 2 of these. This one here is called the Tensui, or Raindrops, and the color is called Space Blue. So on camera, it probably almost looks black. It's a very deep blue, but it is indeed blue. And then here we have the Koseki, or Metal Ore, in Diamond Brown. The difference between these 2 models are basically the color of the material and then the trim and the nib. Everything on the Tensui is rhodium plated, and the Koseki has gold plated trim. Now, we'll just take a look at the Koseki just because I think that shows up a little better on camera. Now, what makes the LB5 so special in the minds of so many? There are a few main reasons. One is the material. The diffusion bonded acrylic is just stunning. I go more in depth in the process in my full review of this pen, but the layers of acrylic are bonded on a molecular level. It actually costs about 10 times more than standard acrylic. Another reason is the size. This is a substantial pen. It's based on the Sailor King of Pen model, but it is slightly longer. And the Sailor King of Pen nib that comes with these pens is outstanding. The ink capacity isn't the greatest with this pen, but that doesn't bother me too much. I like to change out my inks on a regular basis anyways. And then finally, these pens are a very limited edition. There are 7 different colors of the LB5, and only 50 of each color was produced. So if you own an LB5, you feel like you're part of an exclusive club. They've been sold out for the last 2 to 3 years, so the only place that you really find these is on the secondary market. And if you could ever get your hands on one, I'm confident it will be one of the jewels of your collection. They are amazing pens. Up next is a pen that I have yet to review. And it is one of my favorites, and I've been meaning to get to it for a while. And that is the Sailor King of Pen ProGear Sky. This is a limited edition model that I believe is sold out at retailers. I did a cursory search for one today and could not locate one for sale. There is one model which is the Earth, which is kind of brownish. Then there's the Ocean, which is a blue-gray, and then this Sky, which is a translucent blue that I just love. As with the LB5, this pen utilizes Sailor's King of Pen nib, which I adore, and that behind the King of Pen nib on the Ebonite model I showed earlier, this one, the one on this pen is a close second in regard to my favorites. It's big and fat and juicy and amazing. I love the size and feel of the King of Pen ProGear. It's close to perfect for me. You can even use it posted just fine. This was a pen I really lucked into. I had seen this pen and really liked it, but was really wavering on picking one up. I took a trip to New York City to interview Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I swung by the Fountain Pen Hospital right before the interview. I saw this pen in one of the displays and just knew I needed to have it. This was actually the very last one they had in stock, and it had the medium nib that I wanted. So I felt it was a bit of fate, and I couldn't walk out of there without it. Here's a picture of us after the interview. I wasn't going to ask for a picture, but his publicist who was there asked to get one, and I'm glad she did. He's holding up the pens we went over during the interview, and I have this very King of Pen ProGear in my hand that I had purchased only about 2 or 3 hours before. So not only does this pen provide an outstanding writing experience, it reminds me of a very fun and adventurous day in New York City. And I've said this before, but when you can tie memories and experiences to pens, then they become that much more special and personal to you. Okay, next up is a pen from Visconti. Now, I considered a number of Visconti models for this slot on this list. There was this Opera Crystal Midnight, which quite possibly is my favorite Visconti. This one was actually a limited edition of 38, so they're rather difficult to come by. I also considered this Desert Springs, or this Opera Desert Springs, which is a special edition anniversary limited edition of only 15, which is kind of amazing that I have one of 15. But the model that I decided to include here is a little more obtainable, and that is the Visconti Homosapiens Black Lava models. Now, there are a few different varieties. There is the Dark Age, which has stainless steel trim with a black coating. There's also a Bronze Age, where the trim is bronze, as well as a Steel Age, where the trim is stainless steel. This one here is the sterling silver model, which is a bit rare. When Visconti first launched the Homosapiens, they offered a full desk set, and this was the model of the pen that was included in that set. At a later point, there was a retailer who had the fountain pens available to purchase apart from the set, and you can see that the main difference here between this model and those being offered today is the extra set of rings on the barrel. This pen is made from a mix of material, which is 50% basaltic lava from Mount Etna in Italy and 50% resin. Lava is porous, and so the resin needs to be mixed so you can have a pen which will actually hold ink. In addition, the material is hygroscopic, which means that it can absorb things like oil or wetness from your hand, or even ink. You need to be careful to wipe the section off right after that you've inked this up, so it doesn't absorb some of the ink. The material can even vary in a number of properties from pen to pen. The two models I have basically are more pitted, but they aren't rough though. Brian Goulet has a Steel Age where the material is much more smooth and almost has more of a glossy finish. The medium 23 karat palladium Dream Touch nibs are outstanding on both of these pens. And the Homosapien uses Visconti's power filling system, which is their name for their vacuum filling system. This is one of those pens that is a conversation starter. And owning a pen made from lava is just downright cool. In addition, on mine, I like that this sterling silver model is rare. There's not a lot of these out there. I don't know how many were in that edition, but I don't know if I've seen many others out there. Okay, next up on the list isn't necessarily a specific pen, but a specific material, and that is the OMAS Arco celluloid. Now, I happen to have two pens with this material. I have an OMAS Mylord, as well as an Armando Simoni Club Bologna Extra Arco. Now, what's so special about this material? Well, the main reason for me is that I just feel it is stunningly beautiful. I discussed this more in depth in my review of the OMAS Mylord, but essentially the original manufacturing process for this material is no longer even legal. The process was quite dangerous and it would take up to a year to produce a batch. OMAS manufactured a number of pens with this material, and when they went out of business, the existing Arco rods were purchased by the Armando Simoni Club, and they subsequently used them for this Bologna Extra model. The Arco is unique. It really has its own personality and beauty. Every Arco pen will have its own distinct look. For me, this Mylord was truly a Grail pen. I really wanted one for a long time. Not necessarily the Mylord, but just any Arco pen. But I was having a very difficult time finding one that would fit in my budget. And I searched for months. I had alerts set up every time one hit eBay. I'd look for them at pen shows, but the ones there were just priced very high or more than I was willing to pay. I actually had a retailer who was willing to sell me a gorgeous Mylord with a rose gold trim out of their personal collection, but the price they were asking was just more than I was willing to pay. It was kind of the I'm not looking to sell, but if you give me this much, then I'll part with it price. It was fair, just more than I wanted to spend. Finally, I found one at a somewhat reasonable price from a reputable seller, and I'm very glad I was able to find it. But it was a long journey, and the fact that I had to search so long in order to find this pen and end up with it really makes it that much more special. Now, what's sad is I believe that ASC has used up their rod stock. So in regard to new pens, the brown Arco, I believe, is gone forever. Now, it will live on in the aftermarket, but not for anything brand new. But the legend of OMAS Arco will forever live on. Okay, up next I have a bit of a cheat because it's two pens. But they're closely related. And those pens are the Pilot Custom 845 and the Pilot Custom Arushi. Now, these are the top-of-the-line pens in regard to Pilot's standard models. The 845 is something that's only available through Japanese retailers. Other than an eBay auction, it's not readily available here in the US. So there are some extra hoops that you need to jump through in order to obtain one of these pens. There's black and there's also a vermilion, a red model. It's made from ebonite and coated with black Arushi lacquer. The 18 karat gold medium nib on the 845 is incredibly smooth. It's one of the smoothest in my entire collection. The nib really glides across the page. Early this year, I visited the Goulet Pen headquarters, and during my visit, I picked up this pen, the big brother to the 845, which is the Pilot Custom Arushi. Now, this model is widely available here in the US through many retailers, and I thought that the 845 was a large pen, but it is just dwarfed by the Custom Arushi. Now, the Custom Arushi is basically the same pen as the 845, but everything about it is just larger, even down to the nib. The 845 has Pilot's number 15 nib, and the Custom Arushi has their number 30 nib. And just like the nib on the 845, the Custom Arushi nib is very, very smooth, which is something that you really don't see a lot of when it comes to these oversized nibs. I just really love both of them. Now, I will say that while both of these pens are ebonite covered in an Arushi lacquer, just from looking at the pen, it's really difficult to differentiate this material from some high-end resin pens. Now, under a loupe, you can see the brush strokes where the Arushi lacquer was applied, so it's there. But it's not like the Danny Trejo I showed you earlier where the Arushi adds to the aesthetic beauty of the pen. But these pens fit right in with the rest of Pilot's Custom and Custom Heritage line, which for the most part have these same looks. But these two pens are incredible, and I would highly recommend picking up one or both of them. Okay, we are in the home stretch, 4 more to go. Next up is a pen from Mont Blanc, and it is the Mont Blanc 149. This was definitely a Grail pen for me early in my collecting. I really wanted one, but there was no way I was going to commit to pay full retail for this pen, which was about $750. At that point, the most I had ever spent on a pen was $115, so that would have been quite a leap. As luck would have it, I found out about an estate auction about 2.5 hours from where I live. In this auction, there were lots of high-end, limited edition pens that I didn't necessarily appeal to me. But there were 2 of these Mont Blanc 149s, new, unused, and still in the box. And it had the fine nib I preferred for this pen. So I drove all the way out there, hoping that I could get a deal on one of these 2 lots. If you've ever been to an auction where you're actually interested in purchasing one of these items, it's a lot of fun. I ended up winning the auction for the first of the 2 pens for $340. So even if you account for the auction house fees, I was able to pick this up for half of the full retail price, which was still a price that scared me a great deal. It was 3 times as much that I had ever spent on a pen before. But I haven't regretted the purchase at all. The 149 is a classic pen. Some folks feel it's a bit boring and that the Mont Blanc name is more brand than performance, but this 149 has performed great for me over the years. I tend to keep it inked up with the Ackerman Shocking Blue, which looked really nice coming out of this pen. So in order to obtain this pen, I had to take a 5-hour round trip, so there was a physical journey, and there was a risk that I would get outbid and walk away empty-handed. So there was an emotional journey taken as well in order to obtain this pen. So what I had to go through in order to get my hands on this thing, it makes it that much more special to me. Okay, next up is a pen from a much revered Japanese brand. The brand is Nakiya. And while just about any of their pens can be considered Grail pens, the ones that I have in my collection are the Decapod Twist and the Dorsal Fin 2. Now, I am fully aware that the correct pronunciation of the company is slightly different. I believe in Japanese, all the A sounds are correct. So the name is more like Nakiya, something along those lines. But my Western mouth has a hard time saying that. So for the purposes of this video, I am sticking with Nakiya. Now, it's difficult keeping the info about this pen to a little blurb, but for the sake of this review, there's just too much to go over in regard to the company and their pens. I haven't reviewed this Decapod Twist yet, but I do have a review of the Dorsal Fin 2, and you can check that out for a much more in-depth look at Nakiya and this pen. Nakiya pens are works of art. The wait for a dorsal fin can be extremely long. Sometimes the wait is over a year. My birthday falls in November, and one year I ordered this pen in November with the intentions of it being a gift to myself for my next birthday. And at the time I placed the order, I was informed that the wait was going to be around 13 months. But sometimes you never know, because 3 months later in February, I received an email saying my pen was on the way. Not quite sure why there was no longer a wait, but I wasn't about to complain. The wait can be excruciating, but having to wait for a long time in order to receive a Nakiya is very much worth it. For this Decapod, I can't recall exactly, but I'm thinking I needed to wait around 6 months for this one to arrive. The craftsmanship and artistry that goes into the creation of a Nakiya is mind-boggling. Depending on the pen, there can be over 100 layers of Arushi lacquer applied in order to achieve the desired effect. For this Dorsal Fin 2, the buildup of the lacquer in order to create these fins is a very cool technique. Now, there's an original dorsal fin. This Dorsal Fin 2 actually has fins on both the barrel and the cap, and there's an original one that only has a fin on the cap. I adore my Nakiyas, especially this Dorsal Fin 2. It's one of my favorite possessions, not just one of my favorite fountain pens, but any Nakiya is well deserving of the Grail pen moniker. Okay, 2 more. The next spot on this list is more of an action than a specific pen, and this action is to work with a well-known pen maker to create your own custom pen. There are a lot of very talented artisans out there making pens. Folks like Jonathan Brooks and Sean Newton and Ryan Krusak, just to name a few. I hate to leave other people out. There's many other folks out there doing incredible work. I've worked with all three of the gentlemen I mentioned, and not only do they create fantastic pens, but they're great to deal with on the business side of things as well. Typically, when you contact someone to create a custom pen for you, it begins a conversation where you and the artisan work together to map out exactly what you're looking for. And that can be just about anything. I have a friend who wanted a pen that incorporated a special earring into a roll stop, and they created that for a custom pen. And the matching earring was incorporated into a pen stand. I was a big San Diego Charger fan in football, and I thought it would be cool to have a Charger fountain pen. So I worked with Sean Newton to create just that. And it was a fun and interesting process. We worked together to determine the size and the dimensions for the pen. I had some specific ideas in regard to colors I wanted to use, and Sean had some custom acrylics made. I wanted to incorporate powder blue and white and gold into the pen. When Sean received the acrylics, his guy had given him another rod with these three colors mixed. And Sean actually made two different barrels, and I was able to choose which one I felt looked best. Sean works with a gentleman who can handcraft unique clips, so we had this one of a kind of lightning bolt made. And this is the end result. Now, I will admit that this pen is not for everyone. And considering how right after I received this pen, the Chargers moved to Los Angeles, it might not even be for me any longer, but that's another conversation. But this is exactly what I asked for. And it was a fun and unique process. It was even cool because Sean actually gave me the designs for when he actually kind of designed the pen. So one of these days I need to frame this and put this on my wall because I think it's kind of cool to have his little design and the measurements and everything that he used in order to create the pen. So I would encourage you to reach out to a custom pen maker to create your perfect pen. Okay. Last up is a pen that I adore, and that pen is the Conant Bulk Filler King Size. The only regret that I have about this pen is that it took me too long to make the purchase. I must have visited Conant's site a dozen times before finally pulling the trigger. The Bulk Filler King Size is very similar in size and shape to the Pen ProGear model I showed earlier. The quality and craftsmanship on this pen is outstanding. This shape feels perfect in my hand. The pen is heavy enough to feel substantive, but I don't feel that it's so heavy that it feels burdensome. The bulk filling system is unique and proprietary to Conant pens. In essence, what you have with this system is a piston filler with a much higher ink capacity. The piston mechanism is designed in a way which alleviates the need for it to take up half the barrel. The medium 14 karat gold nib, which is a number 8 Bach nib on this king size, is tuned to perfection. It really glides across the page with just a touch of feedback to remind you that you're using a fountain pen. I like the story behind this relatively small manufacturer, and I like the products that they're producing. Sometimes, depending on their production schedules, there can be a bit of a wait in order to receive this pen. But Conant is good about communicating exactly when you should expect your pen. I just love this pen. Down the line, I can easily imagine myself purchasing another Conant pen. It's one I feel fits very well in this Grail pen category. So, there is my list of top 10 Grail pens. But I do have one more recommendation for you, and that is to go find your own Grail pen. A Grail pen is a personal choice. What's special to me might not be special and meaningful to you. So find that special pen that isn't necessarily easily obtained, because once you have finally acquired that pen, it will mean that much more to you, especially knowing what you had to go through in order to get it in your hands. Okay, to recap the pens that made this list, let's head over here to camera 2. In no particular order, my list of the top 10 Grail pens are the Pen 18111. This model is the Night Sky Sakura. The classic Pens LB5. Then the Sailor King of Pen ProGear. Then we have a Visconti Homosapien. Then we have any pen using OMAS Arco celluloid, this one being the ASC Bologna Extra Arco. Then we have a Pilot Custom Arushi, and also the 845. A Mont Blanc 149. Then there's any pen from Nakiya. This is the Dorsal Fin 2. A custom pen made for you by one of the extremely talented artisans out there crafting high quality pens. And then finally, the Conant Bulk Filler King Size. As I had already said, I encourage you to go out and find your own Grail pen. If you have something in mind that you're working to obtain or hope to obtain in the future, let me know in the comments. I'd like to hear what pens that you feel are Grail worthy. It's interesting to hear what viewers feel are worth the moniker. If you would care to see more in-depth reviews of each of these pens, I have reviews of all of them other than the King of Pen ProGear Sky and the Nakiya Decapod Twist on my channel. And I'll provide links to those reviews in the notes below. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.